I have performed open-heart surgery on dying patients without my hands shaking once. But when that champagne glass exploded against my skull on Christmas Eve, it was not the pain that made my blood run cold. It was my granddaughter's scream. It was the pills hidden in Sophie's backpack. It was the realization that the real victim in this house was not me. It was her. Thank you for being here and staying with me. Before we go any further, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and tell me honestly, have you ever been made to feel like a monster for simply protecting someone you love? Your answers matter, because this story begins exactly at that breaking point. Also, a quick note. Parts of this story have been slightly dramatized to enhance the message and emotional impact. Any resemblance to real people, or places, is purely coincidental, but the lesson behind it is very real. My name is Eleanor Voss. For 40 years I stood under the fluorescent lights of the Johns Hopkins Cardiac Unit performing surgeries that most physicians refuse to attempt. I held beating hearts in my hands. I sutured arteries thinner than thread. I retired at 65 with steady hands and a reputation that could fill auditoriums. But on Christmas Eve, sitting at the head of my dining table in my Georgetown townhouse, I realized the one heart I could never repair was my own son's. The evening started beautifully. My townhouse was decorated in gold and ivory. The smell of roasted duck and rosemary filled the air, a recipe my late husband Richard perfected before the cancer took him 7 years ago. Sophie, my 5-year-old granddaughter, sat on the floor near the fireplace, arranging coloring pencils by shade. She looked up at me every few minutes with those wide brown eyes, smiling like I had hung the moon. That smile was the only honest thing in the room. To my left sat Nathan, my 34-year-old son, wearing a sweater I bought him, drinking wine I paid for, sitting in a house I owned outright. His eyes darted between his plate and his wife like a dog waiting for a command. To my right sat Kristen, his wife of 4 years, 31 years old with the face of a magazine cover and the morality of a loan shark. Across from me sat Frank and Diane Hargrove, her parents. They had arrived with suitcases. Not overnight bags. Suitcases. We were cutting into the duck when Kristen put down her fork. She dabbed her lips with a napkin and cleared her throat. "Ellie," she began. Her voice was silk over barbed wire. "We need to talk about the 3rd and 4th floors. They are just sitting empty. Nathan and I think it is time for Mom and Dad to move in. They are going through a difficult transition, and family supports family, right?" I continued cutting my duck with the precision of a surgical incision. I looked at Nathan, waiting for him to speak, to be the man I raised. He stared at his plate like a child, avoiding vegetables. I set my knife and fork down. The metal clicked against porcelain like a period at the end of a sentence. "No," I said. The word filled the room like a pressure change before a storm. "This is my home, Kristen. Not a halfway house. Your parents are not going through a transition. They are fleeing a federal tax investigation for hiding $1.2 million from the IRS. I will not harbor fugitives under my roof." Kristen's smile was ripped away like a surgical drape. She had not expected me to know. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You sit in this massive house all alone. 6 bedrooms. And you hoard space while my parents sleep in a motel. You are a selfish, bitter old woman." Nathan looked up, not to defend me. "She is right, Mom," he said. His voice was flat, programmed. "You have more space than you need. Dad would have wanted us together. You care more about your antiques than about us." I looked at my son, 34, unemployed 8 months, living off my credit cards, gambling debts, hidden in apps I was not supposed to know about. "You are not strangers," I said, my voice calibrated like a code blue. "Strangers pay for their meals. You are dependents. And do not invoke Richard's name. He would have changed the locks the day you quit your job without telling me." That was the trigger. Kristen's hand shot across the table. She grabbed the crystal champagne flute, a Waterford piece from my 20th anniversary. She did not throw the liquid. She threw the glass. Full-leaded crystal launched from 3 feet away with the velocity of pure rage. It struck me above my left eyebrow. The impact was sharp and clarifying. Glass shattered on contact. Blood slid down my temple, pooling beside my eye, dripping onto the white linen napkin on my lap. Then Sophie screamed. Not a startled cry. A wail of terror from somewhere deep inside a child who had seen too much. She scrambled backward, knocking pencils everywhere, grabbing her little purple backpack and clutching it against her chest like a shield. Her eyes locked on the blood running down my face. I did not wipe it away. I looked at Kristen, standing, chest heaving, hands still extended. No regret in her eyes. Only calculation. I looked at Nathan, mouth open, hands trembling, frozen between his wife and his mother. He did not move toward me. I looked at Sophie, my granddaughter pressing that backpack against her heart. The backpack Kristen never let me open. The one Sophie carried everywhere like it could protect her from the world. And sitting there with blood streaming down my face and a 5-year-old screaming on my floor, I was not thinking about the pain. I was not thinking about betrayal. I was thinking about what was inside that backpack. I was thinking about the tremor in Sophie's hands that had nothing to do with fear, about the way her pupils dilated at odd hours, about the heart palpitations Dr. Johnson flagged 3 months ago. I was thinking like a surgeon, and the diagnosis forming in my mind was far more terrifying than any champagne glass. I stood up slowly. My knees did not pop. My hands did not tremble. 40 years of surgery had trained my body to remain functional under catastrophic stress. I reached for the napkin and pressed it against the wound above my eyebrow. The linen turned red immediately, but the pressure was enough to slow the flow. No one moved. The room was frozen in a tableau of guilt and shock. Frank had his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Diane was gripping the edge of the table, with white knuckles. Nathan had taken one step forward and then stopped, as if an invisible leash had yanked him back. Kristen stood behind her chair, breathing hard, her eyes darting between the blood on my face and the door. I did not look at any of them. I looked at Sophie. She was still on the floor, still clutching that purple backpack, her small body shaking with silent sobs. I walked to her. I crouched down despite the throbbing in my skull and the warmth running past my eye. I placed my free hand on her cheek. "We are going for a drive, sweetheart," I said softly. "Grandma needs a bandage. Will you come with me?" She nodded. Her lower lip was trembling, but she reached for my hand with the trust that only a child can offer someone who has never hurt them. I lifted her onto my hip. She was light, lighter than she should have been for her age. Another observation filed away in the clinical cabinet of my mind. Nathan stepped forward. "Mom, let me drive you." He sounded desperate, guilty. "Sit down," I said without turning around. My voice carried the authority of 4 decades in operating rooms where my word was absolute law. "You lost the right to help me when you watched your wife throw that glass. Do not follow me. Do not call me." I walked out of the dining room carrying Sophie against my chest. Her face was buried in my neck. I could feel her heartbeat against my collarbone. It was fast. Too fast for a child at rest. 120 beats per minute at minimum. Tachycardia in a 5-year-old who was simply being held by her grandmother. That was not fear. That was pharmacological. I grabbed my car keys from the console table in the foyer. I stepped out into the December night. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from neighboring chimneys. Georgetown was quiet on Christmas Eve. The brick sidewalks were dusted with frost. I strapped Sophie into her car seat in the back of my Lexus and drove toward George Washington University Hospital. The drive took 11 minutes. Sophie fell asleep before we reached M Street. Her body surrendered to exhaustion the moment she felt safe. I watched her in the rearview mirror. Her hands were still curled around the straps of that backpack, even in sleep. 6 months. I had been watching for 6 months. It started in June when I noticed my phone acting strangely. Battery draining too fast. Odd heat when I was not using it. A background process that consumed data even when every app was closed. I am not a technology expert, but I am a scientist. I observe. I hypothesize. I test. I took the phone to a specialist who confirmed what I suspected. Someone had installed a monitoring application that tracked my location, recorded my calls, and mirrored my text messages. The app was registered to an email address I did not recognize, but the specialist traced the installation timestamp. It was loaded onto my phone during a Sunday dinner 3 days after I declined to co-sign a loan for Nathan and Kristen's failed restaurant venture. The phone had been in my purse, in the hallway, while Kristen used the bathroom. That was the moment I understood. I was not dealing with a difficult daughter-in-law. I was dealing with a predator who had already marked her territory. I did not confront her. Confrontation without evidence is just noise. Instead, I called Victoria Chen, the sharpest family attorney in the District of Columbia. Victoria had represented senators in custody battles and CEOs in divorce proceedings. She was expensive, precise, and she understood that in family law, the first person to document wins. We spent 6 months building what Victoria called Protocol Alpha, a contingency plan. Hidden cameras installed in every room of my townhouse during a routine security upgrade. Audio recording systems tied to a cloud server that Kristen could not access or delete. A binder of financial records documenting every dollar I had spent on Nathan and Kristen over 4 years. A sealed letter with my physician confirming my full cognitive capacity, and a pre-drafted emergency protective order that required only a single trigger event to activate. Tonight, Kristen had provided that trigger. I pulled into the emergency room parking lot and turned off the engine. Sophie was still asleep, her breathing steady now, her face peaceful against the car seat padding. I looked at her for a long moment. 5 years old, depending on me completely, trusting me absolutely. I pulled out my phone. The screen smeared with blood as I unlocked it. I found Victoria Chen's contact. I typed a single message. She drew blood. Execute the order. The reply came in 40 seconds. Even on Christmas Eve. Victoria Chen did not sleep when a case was active. Are you safe? I am at GW Emergency. Sophie is with me. Good. Police are being dispatched to your residence now. Do not return until they confirm the premises are clear. The protective order will be served within the hour. I put the phone back in my pocket. I looked at Sophie one more time. Whatever happened in the next few hours, whatever chaos erupted when those police lights hit my townhouse windows, this child was never going back to that woman. Not tonight. Not ever. I stepped out of the car. I opened the rear door and carefully unstrapped Sophie, lifting her against my shoulder without waking her. Her backpack dangled from one strap. I carried her through the automatic doors of the emergency room and into the harsh white light. The intake nurse gasped when she saw my face. The blood had soaked through the napkin and was now running freely down my jaw. She asked what happened. Domestic violence, I said clearly. My voice was loud enough for the security guard by the water fountain to hear. I was assaulted in my own home, by my daughter-in-law. She led me to a curtained bay immediately. I sat on the gurney with Sophie curled in my lap, still sleeping, still clutching that backpack. A young resident began cleaning the wound. 5 stitches. Neat and quick. He told me he was required by law to report the injury. I know, I said. The police are already on their way. He looked at me with surprise. Most victims of domestic violence do not arrive with legal infrastructure already in motion. But I was not most victims. I was a surgeon. And 6 months ago, I had diagnosed the disease. Tonight, I had simply begun the operation. The police cruiser was already in my driveway when we arrived. Its lights were off, but the engine was running, exhaling white clouds into the freezing air. A second unit was at the curb. Christmas lights twinkled red and gold against the brick facade, a grotesque contrast to what was about to unfold inside. Officer Reeves met me at the sidewalk. Tall, shaved head, calm eyes. He looked at the bandage on my forehead, then at Sophie sleeping against my shoulder. Ma'am, the order has been served, he said. They are aware they need to vacate. 10 minutes to gather essentials. I need to put my granddaughter to bed first, I said. She cannot see this. Of course. I carried Sophie through the side entrance and up the service staircase to the fourth-floor guest room I had converted into her bedroom months ago. Lavender walls, butterfly decals, a crescent moon nightlight. I laid her down and pulled the quilt to her chin. Her fingers were still wrapped around the backpack strap. I loosened them gently and set the bag on the nightstand. Tomorrow I would open it. Tonight, I had a different surgery to complete. I walked downstairs and nodded to Officer Reeves. The front door opened. Kristen was standing at the bottom of the staircase wearing my late husband's robe. Her face was a mask of performative outrage. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her jaw was set hard, muscles working beneath the skin. Nathan stood behind her, hands in his pockets, shoulders curved inward like a man trying to disappear. Frank was in the dining room doorway, holding a plate of duck. Diane was on the sofa surrounded by shopping bags filled with my silver candlesticks and crystal decanters. Officer Reeves stepped inside with his partner, Officer Cho. "Mrs. Kristen Voss," he began, "you have been served with an emergency protective order. You and all non-resident persons are required to vacate immediately. 5 minutes to collect essentials. Wallets, phones, medications. No furniture. No valuables." Kristen's head snapped toward me. Her eyes were volcanic. "You cannot do this," she screamed. "This is my home. I have rights. You cannot throw a pregnant woman out on Christmas Eve." "Ma'am," Officer Cho said flatly, "this residence is owned solely by Eleanor Voss. You are not on the deed or any lease. The order is enforceable immediately." Kristen lunged toward the staircase. "My daughter is up there. Sophie is mine. This is kidnapping." Officer Reeves blocked her with one arm. "The child is in legal custody of the homeowner per the emergency order. Any attempt to remove her will result in arrest." "Step back." Kristen turned to Nathan. "Do something," she commanded. Her voice was a whip crack. "Call someone. Do not just stand there." Nathan looked at me. For one fleeting second I saw something behind his eyes. Not anger. Something that looked almost like relief. But it vanished instantly, swallowed by 4 years of training. "Mom, please," he said. His voice cracked. "Just let us stay tonight. It is Christmas. We can talk in the morning." I looked at my son, the boy I taught to tie his shoes, the man who watched his wife assault me. "You made your choice, Nathan," I said. "You made it when you sat there and let her throw that glass." Frank stepped forward, face purple with bourbon and indignation. "I am not going anywhere. I have a bad back. It is 20 degrees outside." Officer Cho placed her hand on her belt. "Sir, you have 2 minutes." Frank put his plate down. They scrambled. Kristen grabbed her purse and charger, hissing obscenities. Diane abandoned the stolen silver with visible anguish. Nathan took his jacket and keys. Frank stuffed dinner rolls into his coat pocket, a lifelong reflex. One by one they filed out into the Christmas Eve cold. Frost had thickened on the brick steps. Their breath made furious clouds. Kristen turned at the bottom of the stairs and pointed at me. I was standing in the doorway, warm light behind me, bandage visible on my forehead. "You will die alone in this house," she said. "I will take everything. Sophie, your money, your reputation. When you are rotting in a nursing home, I will sell this place and never visit once." I said nothing. I watched them get into Nathan's car. Kristen hit Nathan's shoulder as he fumbled with keys. Frank argued in the back seat. They were already turning on each other. The car disappeared around the corner of 34th Street. Officer Reeves told me to call 911 if they returned. A patrol would circle the block tonight. I stepped inside and closed the heavy wooden door. I turned the deadbolt. The brass mechanism slid into place, with a sound that resonated through the foyer, like the final note of a symphony. Silence. For the first time in 3 years, my home was truly mine. The grandfather clock ticked. Christmas lights blinked in the parlor. Upstairs, Sophie was sleeping safely in her lavender room. But I did not feel relief. I knew Kristen. I knew the look in her eyes. She was not defeated. She was regrouping. Whatever came next would be uglier than a champagne glass. I walked to the kitchen and put on the kettle. Chamomile tea. I sat at the table and opened the security camera app on my phone. Every feed cycled through. Empty. Clean. Secure. Then I noticed the blinking red light on the home security keypad. I walked over and entered my code. Error. Invalid. I tried again. Invalid. She had changed the master code before she left. My tea went cold as the implications settled into my bones. If she had tampered with the alarm, what else had she done? What else was she watching? What else had she planted in the walls of my home while I slept, while I cooked, while I held my granddaughter? I picked up my phone and found the number for Marcus Webb, former military, specializing in electronic surveillance detection. I had used him once before, on a hospital security consultation years ago. He was expensive, thorough, and available at any hour. I dialed. He answered on the second ring. Marcus, I said. This is Eleanor Voss. I need a full sweep. Electronic and physical. I suspect cameras and listening devices throughout the residence. I need your team here at dawn. He asked if I was safe. I told him I was. I told him the threat had been removed from the premises, but that its eyes and ears might still be embedded in my walls. Consider it done, he said. I hung up. I sat in the dark kitchen listening to the kettle cool. Somewhere in this house, hidden in smoke detectors or taped behind picture frames, Kristen's surveillance network was still active. She had been watching me for months, listening to my calls, tracking my movements, building a case to steal my autonomy. But she had made one critical mistake. She had drawn blood. And in doing so, she had given me legal standing to dismantle everything she had built in the shadows. I finished my tea. I checked on Sophie one more time. She was still sleeping. One hand curled beneath her cheek. I pulled the door closed softly. Tomorrow Marcus would come. Tomorrow the walls would give up their secrets. And tomorrow I would find out exactly how deep this infection had spread. Marcus Webb arrived at 7 in the morning with 2 technicians carrying black equipment cases. They did not wish me Merry Christmas. They did not comment on the tree in the parlor or the bandage on my forehead. They moved through my home with the silent efficiency of men trained to clear buildings in hostile territory. Sophie was in the kitchen eating toast with strawberry jam. I had told her that some friends were coming to check the house for bugs. She thought I meant insects. She spent the next hour drawing pictures of ladybugs and caterpillars on her sketch pad, while 3 men dismantled my sense of security piece by piece. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, watching Sophie draw. Her strokes were uneven, her hand trembling slightly. Not from cold. The kitchen was warm. I watched the way her pencil shook against the paper and made another mental note. 4 months of observations, stacked like medical charts in my memory. Marcus came in 40 minutes later. His face was grim. He placed 2 clear evidence bags on the counter, away from Sophie's reach. The first bag contained a device smaller than a coin, black, circular, with a pinhole lens. Found this inside the smoke detector in your living room, he said quietly. High-definition video with audio. Connects to Wi-Fi. It has been streaming to a cloud server. The second bag held a flat rectangular transmitter, no thicker than a credit card. This was taped to the underside of your desk in the study, he continued. Long-range audio. Picks up everything within 20 feet. Phone calls. Conversations. Keyboard strokes. I looked at the devices. My living room, where I watched the evening news and dozed on Sunday afternoons. My study, where I managed my finances and spoke with Victoria on the phone. They had been watching me sleep. They had been listening to my legal strategy. How long, I asked. Based on dust accumulation and firmware timestamps, at least 6 months, Marcus said. Possibly longer. 6 months. The same timeline as the phone app. Kristen had built a surveillance network around me with the patience of a spider building a web. Every conversation I had with Victoria, every financial document I reviewed, every moment of vulnerability had been captured and stored. Is there more? I asked. One additional camera in the upstairs hallway, he said, positioned to cover the master bedroom door, and Sophie's room. Sophie's room. She had been watching her own daughter's movements in my home. Not out of concern. Out of control. Disable everything, I said. Bag it all. Chain of custody documentation. I need this admissible. Marcus nodded. His team continued upstairs. Sophie looked up from her drawing. Grandma, did they find the bugs? They found a few, sweetheart, I said. But we are getting rid of them. She smiled and went back to her caterpillar. She had no idea that the bugs in this house were far more dangerous than anything with 6 legs. While Marcus finished the upper floors, I walked to the guest room Nathan and Kristen had used as their shared office. The door was ajar. Inside was chaos. Papers on the floor, drawers half open, a phone charger still plugged into the wall. In their rush to leave, they had grabbed their phones and tablets, but they had left behind Nathan's old laptop, a battered machine he used for what he called financial planning, which was mostly online poker and cryptocurrency losses. The lid was closed. The charging light was green. I opened it. Password screen. I tried Nathan's birthday. Incorrect. I tried Sophie's birthday. Incorrect. I tried Kristen with a capital K followed by 1, 2, 3. The screen unlocked. My son's digital life was secured by his wife's name. Even his passwords belonged to her. I navigated to the file explorer. Most of it was useless. Resume drafts never sent. Downloaded memes. Gambling site bookmarks. But buried in the system files was a folder labeled Mom's Wellness. The name sounded innocent. A caring son monitoring his aging mother's health. I clicked it open. No medical records inside. No medication lists. No doctor's appointments. Instead, I found brochures, PDF files for assisted living facilities. Not the reputable ones with gardens and art therapy. The state-funded warehouses where people were stored and sedated into silence. I opened the next file. A draft petition for emergency guardianship. Dated 3 weeks ago. It claimed that Eleanor Voss was suffering from rapid cognitive decline, paranoid delusions, and erratic financial behavior. It cited specific dates when I had allegedly displayed confusion. I checked those dates against my calendar. On one, I had been delivering a keynote at a cardiology conference. On another, I had been at the dentist. Fabrications. Lies constructed to strip me of everything I had earned. But the worst was still loading. A subfolder labeled Family Chat. Nathan had synced his messages to the laptop and never logged out. I opened the most recent thread. A group conversation between Nathan, Kristen, and a contact labeled Mom D, which I knew was Diane. I scrolled to the messages from Christmas Eve morning. 2 hours before dinner. Kristen. The old surgeon is being difficult again. She will not budge on the floors. Diane. Stick to the plan. She is losing it. A few more months and we file. Kristen. I cannot wait that long. I want the master bedroom. Her taste is depressing. Nathan. We have to be careful. If she catches on, she will cut us off. Kristen. She is too arrogant to suspect anything. She thinks we love her. She is just a retirement fund. With a pulse. Diane. Get the power of attorney signed before you file. We need the accounts unfrozen the same day. Kristen. Do not worry, Mom. The old woman is slowing down already. Sophie's meds are working perfectly. She thinks the kid is just hyperactive. If stress does not kill her, the pills will slow her down enough for the filing. I stopped reading. I closed my eyes. I placed both hands flat on the desk and pressed down until my knuckles went white. Sophie's meds. Working perfectly. Slow her down enough. She was not just drugging my granddaughter to create a false diagnosis of hyperactivity. She was using the chaos of a medicated child to accelerate my stress levels. She was engineering my decline. She was using my own granddaughter as a weapon against me. I opened my eyes. My hands were steady. A surgeon's hands are always steady. But somewhere behind my sternum, In the space where the heart pumps and the lungs expand, something broke. Not dramatically, quietly, like a hairline fracture in load-bearing bone. The kind that does not show on the surface, but changes the structure forever. I pulled out a portable hard drive from my desk drawer. I plugged it in and copied everything. Every file, every message, every browsing record. The progress bar crawled across the screen while Sophie's laughter drifted up from the kitchen below. She was laughing. Despite everything they had done to her little body, she was still laughing. And I was going to make sure she never stopped. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my study with the hard drive on my desk and watched Sophie's breathing on the baby monitor I had placed in her room. Every rise and fall of her small chest was a countdown. Every accelerated heartbeat was evidence of a poison being administered by the one person biologically designed to protect her. At 6 in the morning, on the 26th of December, I called Dr. Amara Johnson's emergency line. Amara was Sophie's pediatrician, a woman I had known for 15 years through the medical community. She was thorough, compassionate, and she understood that when Eleanor Voss called before dawn, it was not a social visit. "I need blood work on Sophie today," I said. "I need a comprehensive metabolic panel and a specific screen for amphetamine compounds. Specifically, Adderall." There was a pause. Amara's voice was careful when she replied. "Ellie, Sophie has never been prescribed stimulants. She has no ADHD diagnosis on file." "I know," I said. "That is why I am calling." She told me to bring Sophie in at 8:30. Her office would be closed for the holiday, but she would open it personally. I thanked her and hung up. Sophie woke at 7. She padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes, her hair a tangle of brown curls. She looked better than she had in months. Her eyes were clearer. Her movements were less jittery. One night without whatever Kristen had been giving her, and the difference was already visible to a trained eye. I made her oatmeal with blueberries. She ate it slowly, swinging her feet beneath the chair. Halfway through the bowl, she looked up at me. "Grandma, where is Mommy?" "Mommy had to go away for a little while," I said. "But you are staying here with me. Is that okay?" She nodded without hesitation. Then she said something that cracked the professional facade I had maintained for 36 hours. "I like it here better. It is quiet. My head does not hurt here." I set down my coffee cup so she would not see my hand finally tremble. At 8:30, we walked into Dr. Johnson's practice on Wisconsin Avenue. The waiting room was dark and empty, chairs stacked for the holiday closure. Amara met us at the front door wearing casual clothes and carrying her medical bag. Sophie recognized her and smiled. Dr. J gave her a lollipop and led her to the examination room with the mural of ocean creatures on the wall. Sophie sat on the table swinging her legs, distracted by the painted whale above her head. Amara took vitals first. Blood pressure slightly elevated for a 5-year-old. Heart rate 114 beats per minute at rest. She looked at me over her glasses. I nodded. She saw what I saw. "Sophie, sweetheart," Amara said gently, "I am going to take a tiny bit of blood from your arm. It will pinch for just a second. Can you be brave for me?" Sophie held out her arm without flinching. She had been poked before. She was used to it. That realization alone made my stomach turn. A 5-year-old should not be accustomed to needles. Amara drew 2 vials. She labeled them and set them aside for the rush lab she had arranged. Then she performed a basic neurological check. Pupil response, reflex tests, coordination assessment. Sophie's fine motor control was below average for her age. Her pupils were slightly dilated despite the bright examination light. We stepped into the hallway while Sophie colored on the examination table. Amara's face was grave. "How long do you suspect this has been going on?" she asked. "Based on the messages I found, at least 4 months," I said. "Possibly longer." Amara exhaled slowly. "The resting heart rate alone is concerning, Ellie. If she has been on unprescribed amphetamines for 4 months at her age and weight, we could be looking at developing cardiac arrhythmia, myocardial stress in a child this young." She shook her head. This is not just neglect. This is poisoning. I know, I said. The lab results came back in 90 minutes. Amara had called in a personal favor to expedite them. She opened the report on her computer screen, and I watched her expression shift from professional concern to controlled outrage. Amphetamine positive, she said. Consistent with regular Adderall administration. The concentration suggests a dose meant for an adult, not a child. Ellie. This could have caused a cardiac event. A 5-year-old's heart is not built to sustain this kind of pharmacological load. She turned to face me. I am required by law to report this to Child Protective Services immediately. You understand that. I was counting on it, I said. Amara picked up her phone. She made the call while I stood in the hallway looking through the window at Sophie. My granddaughter was drawing a house with a big sun above it and 2 stick figures holding hands. One tall, one small. Grandma and Sophie. No one else. CPS responded within 2 hours. A caseworker named Patricia Owens arrived at Amara's office. She reviewed the blood work. She reviewed the chat log printouts I had brought. She reviewed the emergency protective order, already in place. She reviewed my physician's letter, confirming my own cognitive fitness. At 2 in the afternoon on December 26th, Patricia signed an emergency temporary custody order, placing Sophie in my care, pending a full investigation into Kristen Voss for child endangerment. I held the paper in my hands. It was a single page with a court stamp and a caseworker's signature. It weighed almost nothing, but it was the heaviest document I had ever carried because it represented the official acknowledgement that my granddaughter had been harmed by her own mother. We drove home through the empty holiday streets. Georgetown was quiet, the brownstones draped in garlands, the sidewalks dusted with salt. Sophie sat in the back seat, humming a song I did not recognize. She was calm. She was safe. She was mine to protect now, legally and absolutely. I parked in the garage and turned off the engine. I sat for a moment in the silence. The clinical part of my brain was satisfied. The evidence was documented. The custody was secured. The legal foundation was poured. But the grandmother in me was grieving. Grieving for every dose that small body had absorbed. Grieving for every racing heartbeat that had frightened her in the dark. Grieving for the mother she deserved, but never had. I looked in the rearview mirror. Sophie had fallen asleep again, her cheek pressed against the window, her breath making a small circle of fog on the glass. I made a promise to her in that silence. Not out loud. Promises spoken too soon become fragile. I made it in the place where surgeons make their most sacred commitments, in the quiet space between heartbeats where precision matters more than words. I would dismantle Kristen Voss piece by piece, not with anger, not with vengeance, with the same steady hands that had rebuilt 1,000 hearts. And this time, the heart I was saving was 5 years old and sleeping in my back seat. The counterattack came on the morning of December 27th. I was sitting in the kitchen, watching Sophie eat scrambled eggs, when my phone began to vibrate. Not a call. A notification. Then another. Then 12 more, in rapid succession. The device buzzed across the granite countertop like something alive and angry. I picked it up. I had been tagged in a video on TikTok, a platform I had never used and barely understood. The thumbnail showed a face I knew too well, tear-streaked, backlit, carefully framed to maximize sympathy. I tapped the screen. Kristen was sitting on the edge of a motel bed. The lighting was dim, deliberately chosen to cast shadows that emphasized distress. She wore an oversized gray t-shirt that made her look small and fragile. Her hair was unwashed. Her mascara was smudged in precisely the right pattern. This was not a woman caught in a moment of raw emotion. This was a production. She placed one hand on her stomach. The implication was immediate and calculated. "I do not usually do this," she began, her voice trembling with rehearsed vulnerability. "I try to keep my family life private. But 2 nights ago, something happened that I cannot stay silent about. My mother-in-law, Eleanor Voss, kidnapped my daughter." She paused, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She looked at the camera with wide, wounded eyes. She threw us out on Christmas Eve. Me, my husband, my elderly parents. She got violent. She used her money and her connections to turn the police against us. And then she took my baby. My 5-year-old daughter is trapped in that house with a woman who is not mentally stable. Sophie is scared. She is alone. And I cannot get to her because Eleanor has a restraining order that I never agreed to. Kristen lifted her shirt slightly, revealing the curve of a stomach that was either padded or pushed out with practiced precision. I am 8 weeks pregnant, she whispered. The stress of this situation is putting my baby at risk. I have not slept. I have not eaten. All I want is my daughter back and my family safe. She looked directly into the camera. If anyone can help us, please. Share this video. Tag the police. Tag CPS. We just want to go home. The video ended. I looked at the view counter. 180,000 views. Climbing by the second. The comments section was a river of outrage directed at me. Monster. How can someone kidnap their own grandchild? Drop the address. I will go get that baby myself. Someone call the FBI. This is an Amber Alert situation. Rich people think they own everyone. They did not know I had legal custody. They did not know about the blood work. They did not know that the pregnant belly was as fictional as the kidnapping charge. They saw a crying young mother and an absent wealthy grandmother, and the verdict was instant. I put the phone face down on the table. Sophie looked up from her eggs. Grandma. Who was calling? Nobody important, sweetheart. Eat your breakfast. She returned to her eggs. I returned to my assessment. By noon, the damage had metastasized. My phone showed 47 missed calls from unknown numbers. Text messages appeared from contacts I had not spoken to in years, people who had seen the video shared by mutual friends. Some were concerned. Most were accusatory. One was from Mrs. Patterson next door, a woman whose hip replacement I had personally recommended a surgeon for 5 years ago. Her message read simply, I saw the video, Eleanor. I am shocked and disgusted. That poor girl. You should be ashamed. I did not reply. I walked to the front window and looked out at the street. Georgetown was quiet in the winter afternoon, the brownstones elegant and indifferent. But as I watched, a car slowed in front of my townhouse. A young man leaned out the window and held up his phone, recording my facade. He made an obscene gesture and drove on. I closed the blinds. The siege had shifted from physical to reputational. Kristen could not enter my home, so she was poisoning the air around it. She was turning me into a pariah in my own neighborhood, so that when she made her next legal move, I would have no community support. It was brilliant in its cruelty, and it was exactly what I expected her to do. My phone rang again. This time I recognized the number. Nathan. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. I said nothing. I waited. Mom. His voice was breathless. Have you seen it? The video. It is everywhere. People are losing their minds. They want to come to the house. They want to call the police. I have seen it, I said. You have to fix this, he said. Drop the restraining order. Give Sophie back. If you make a video saying it was a misunderstanding, Kristen will take hers down. She promised. We can tell everyone it is resolved. It is the only way to stop this. There it was. The extortion, wrapped in the language of concern but transparent as glass. Create a crisis, then offer the solution. Break the window, then sell the insurance. Did she paint that belly herself, I asked? Or did she stuff a pillow under her shirt? Silence. Mom, do not be like that. Does it matter? The internet believes her. CPS might believe her if enough people call. You are a 70-year-old woman, living alone with a child. How does that look? It looks, I said carefully, like a grandmother protecting her granddaughter from a woman who has been feeding her unprescribed amphetamines for 4 months. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. I heard Nathan's breathing change. What are you talking about? He whispered. Ask your wife about Sophie's Adderall, I said. Ask her why our granddaughter's resting heart rate is 114 beats per minute. Ask her why Dr. Johnson found adult dose amphetamines in a 5-year-old's bloodstream. Then call me back. I hung up. I blocked his number. I walked back to the kitchen. Sophie had finished her eggs and was now drawing at the table. Another picture. This one showed a house with flowers and a tall woman with gray hair holding hands with a small girl. No one else in the picture. Just us. I looked at my phone one final time. I opened my messages and sent Victoria Chen a single text. She posted a video claiming kidnapping and pregnancy. 200,000 views. Do not respond publicly. Let her file the affidavit. Let her say it under oath. Every lie she commits to paper is a felony count. Victoria replied in seconds. Understood. Let her climb. I put the phone in my drawer and closed it. Let the internet rage. Let Mrs. Patterson judge me from behind her curtains. Let strangers record my house. None of them knew what I knew. None of them had the blood work, the chat logs, the surveillance footage, the custody order. Kristen was building a tower of lies. And every floor she added made the eventual collapse more catastrophic. I did not need to push her. I just needed to wait for gravity. 12 hours of silence. I counted them the way I used to count seconds between heartbeats on a cardiac monitor. Each hour that passed without a response from Nathan was a measurement of the war being waged inside him. He was either processing the truth or being talked out of it. With Kristen, both were happening simultaneously. Sophie and I spent the 28th of December in quiet domesticity. I took her to the park on Dumbarton Street in the morning. She ran through the frost-covered grass chasing pigeons, with a joy that seemed almost desperate, as if her body knew it was free of something toxic and wanted to celebrate before the reprieve ended. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Her laughter echoed off the bare trees. I sat on a bench watching her, cataloging the improvements. Steadier hands. Calmer eyes. No complaint of headaches. 48 hours without the drug, and her body was already recovering. Children are resilient in ways that break your heart precisely because they should never have to be. We returned home at noon. I made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Sophie ate everything without the restless fidgeting that had characterized her meals for months. She asked to watch a movie. I let her choose. She picked something with animated dogs and fell asleep on the sofa within 20 minutes, her head on a throw pillow, her breathing deep and even. I covered her with a blanket and sat in the armchair across the room. The house was quiet. The grandfather clock ticked. The winter light came through the blinds in thin, pale bars. I opened my phone and checked the security cameras. Perimeter clear. Street empty. No cars circling. At 3:17 in the afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Fairfax, Virginia. The motel district off the interstate. I answered but did not speak. Mom. Nathan's voice was different from yesterday. The bravado was gone. The rehearsed aggression had evaporated. What remained was raw and ragged, the voice of a man who had not slept. I am listening, I said. He took a shaky breath. I asked her, he said. About the pills. About what you said. I asked her what Sophie was taking. And what did she say? I asked. He paused. I could hear the tremor in his exhale. She said they were vitamins. She said Dr. Johnson recommended them for focus and energy because Sophie was falling behind in pre-K. She said you were lying to turn me against her. I said nothing. I let the silence work. But Mom, he continued, his voice cracking. I looked it up. I looked up the symptoms, the racing heart, the shaking hands, the dilated pupils. Sophie had all of it, every single one. And Kristen, she always gave Sophie those gummies herself. She never let me do it. She said it was a bonding thing between mother and daughter. His breathing was becoming unsteady. I could hear the architecture of his denial collapsing in real time. I do not know what to believe anymore, he whispered. I do not know what is real. I was about to respond when I heard it. A door slamming in the background. Footsteps. Then a voice I recognized instantly, sharp and commanding. "Who are you talking to?" "Kristen." Not a question. A demand. "Nobody," Nathan said. His voice shifted instantly, became smaller, younger. "Just a friend from—" "Give me the phone." "Nathan, give me the phone now." Scuffling, the sound of a hand slapping against skin, then breathing close to the microphone. Heavier, faster. Kristen had taken the phone. "Eleanor." Her voice was ice wrapped in velvet. "I know you are there. I know you are listening." I said nothing. "You think you are clever," she hissed. "You think because you have some paper from a judge that you have won. But let me tell you something. I know people. I know how the internet works. I have 200,000 people who believe that you stole my child. One phone call and I will have protesters outside your house by morning. One post and your medical license review board will have a file on their desk by Monday." "I have been retired for 4 years," I said calmly. "I do not have an active license." "Then I will go after your legacy," she snapped. "I will contact Johns Hopkins. I will tell them their famous alumna is a kidnapper and an abuser. I will make your name toxic. Do you understand me? You will not be remembered as a surgeon. You will be remembered as a monster." I listened to her threats the way I used to listen to the irregular rhythm of a failing heart, clinically, without emotional contamination, identifying the pathology beneath the noise. "Are you finished?" I asked. "I am just getting started," she said. "Give Sophie back by Friday, or I will burn everything you built to the ground. I will file kidnapping charges. I will go to every news station in this city. I will." "Kristen," I interrupted. My voice was the same tone I used in surgery when a resident panicked and I needed them to focus. Quiet. Absolute. Final. She stopped talking. "I have the blood work," I said. "I have the lab report showing adult dose amphetamines in your 5-year-old daughter's bloodstream. I have your text messages admitting that you administered them deliberately. I have a CPS order. I have a court-granted custody document. And I have 4 years of surveillance footage from my own home, showing exactly who you are." Silence on the line. "You can threaten my reputation," I continued. "You can post 100 videos. You can mobilize every stranger on the internet. But the moment you file a single legal document containing a lie, you will be committing perjury. And the moment you claim that child is in danger with me, I will present the evidence that she was in danger with you. Cardiac danger, Kristen. The kind that kills children." I heard her breathing. Fast. Uneven. The rhythm of a predator realizing it has stepped into a trap. "I am giving you a choice," I said. "Walk away quietly, and I will not pursue criminal charges for the assault or the child endangerment. Continue this war, and I will bury you under evidence so deep that your grandchildren will still be digging out." The line went dead. She hung up. I placed the phone on the armrest. I looked at Sophie, still sleeping on the sofa. Her chest rose and fell in the steady rhythm of peace. Kristen would not walk away. I knew that. People like her do not retreat. They regroup, and they escalate. The threats she had just made were not the words of a woman preparing to negotiate. They were the words of a woman preparing to go to war. But she had revealed something critical in that call. She was afraid. Beneath the threats and the bravado and the calculated cruelty, she was afraid. She did not know exactly how much evidence I had. She did not know whether Nathan had already turned. She was operating blind, and she was making mistakes. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Victoria. She called. Recording attached. Add it to the file. She threatened reputational destruction and admitted to orchestrating the online campaign. That is witness intimidation. Victoria replied in 12 seconds. Received. This is gold, Ellie. She is handing us the case on a platter. I put the phone away. I looked at the clock. 3:42 in the afternoon. Somewhere in a motel off the interstate, Kristen was pacing and planning. But she was doing it without money, without shelter, and now without the certainty that her husband was still loyal. The 12 hours of silence had done their work. Nathan was cracking. Not broken yet, but cracking. and cracks are where the light gets in. On the morning of December 29th, I sat in my study with a cup of black coffee and opened the banking application on my tablet. The American Express Platinum account was linked to real-time transaction alerts. Every swipe, every charge, every authorization pinged directly to my screen. I had set this up years ago as a financial monitoring tool. Now it was a surveillance feed of their desperation. The first alert had come in at 11 the previous night. A booking at the Ritz-Carlton, Georgetown. Not one room, 2 suites. One for Nathan and Kristen, one for Frank and Diane. Total cost for 3 nights, including the holiday surcharge, was $4,200. I stared at the number. They had been evicted from my home 5 days ago. They had been cut off from my physical space, my food, my utilities, my comfort. And their first instinct was not to find jobs or budget their savings. Their first instinct was to replicate the luxury they felt entitled to on my credit. Nathan had been an authorized user on my account since his junior year of college. It was a safety net I had never revoked because I believed it would only be used for genuine emergencies. To Nathan, discomfort was a genuine emergency. Mediocrity was a crisis. Anything less than first class was suffering. More alerts arrived throughout the morning. 9:45, room service breakfast. $212 for eggs, pastries, fresh squeezed juice and champagne. At 11:15, the spa. $380 for Diane and Kristen. Massage, facial, manicure. While their granddaughter recovered from being poisoned, they were getting their nails done. At 1 in the afternoon, the restaurant. Lunch for 4. Lobster bisque, filet mignon, a bottle of Opus One at $350. The total was $860 before tip. I watched the numbers accumulate on my screen, like a surgeon monitoring blood loss during a hemorrhage. The patient was my retirement account, and these parasites were draining it one indulgence at a time. I let them spend through lunch. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them full and warm and confident that despite the eviction, the financial umbilical cord was still intact. I wanted them to believe that I was too old, too tired, or too afraid of public backlash to cut the money. At 2 in the afternoon, I picked up my landline and called the number on the back of my card. I bypassed the automated prompts and reached a fraud specialist. I am looking at several unauthorized charges on my account, I said. A hotel booking, spa services, restaurant charges. These are not mine. Are these from an authorized user? The representative asked. I had a family member listed as an authorized user, I said. That person has taken possession of the card without my consent following a domestic violence incident. I need the account frozen immediately. Report the cards as stolen. Deactivate every card associated with my social security number. The representative confirmed. Account locked. All associated cards deactivated instantly. Any pending transactions would be reversed. Any future attempts would be declined and flagged for potential fraud. I want it noted, I added, that I am at home. I am not at the Ritz-Carlton. If anyone calls from that location attempting to verify identity, it is not me. I hung up. I checked the time, 2:17 in the afternoon. They would be finishing their coffee, perhaps ordering dessert, perhaps a digestive for Frank, a port for Kristen to celebrate how cleverly she had played the system. The waiter would approach with the leather check folder. Nathan would place the platinum card on the tray without looking at the total. He would feel powerful. He would smile at Kristen. He would believe, for one final moment, that he was still the son of a wealthy woman with unlimited access to her generosity. Then the waiter would return. Not with a receipt, with the card held awkwardly. I am sorry, sir. The card has been declined. Do you have another form of payment? Nathan would laugh. Try it again. It must be an error. This card has no limit. The machine would beep. Declined. Call issuer. I imagined the silence spreading across their table like a stain. Frank's face reddening. Kristen's smile dying. Diane clutching her purse. The other diners glancing over with the quiet judgment of people who recognize financial failure when they see it. Frank would have to pay. cash. The roll he kept in his sock for emergencies. He would peel off $100 bills one by one with hands shaking from rage, watching his escape fund shrink with every note placed on the table. That was the wedge. Frank and Diane were only present because they believed Nathan was a golden goose connected to a wealthy matriarch. The moment that connection severed, their loyalty would evaporate like surgical alcohol on warm skin. At 3 o'clock, I opened my email and composed a message to Nathan. Subject: Notice of financial independence. Nathan, as of 2 in the afternoon today, all credit cards, banking privileges, and authorized user accounts associated with my name have been terminated. Transactions from the past 24 hours have been reported as unauthorized. The lease guarantee I provided for your previous apartment has been withdrawn. Any debts you incur from this point forward are yours alone. You are 34 years old. You have a degree I paid for. You have a healthy body. If you need money, I suggest you ask your father-in-law. He seemed eager to enjoy the benefits of my labor. Perhaps he is willing to share his own. Do not come to my house. Do not call me. Eleanor. I hit send. The house was quiet. Sophie was upstairs napping, her afternoon rest now peaceful and unmedicated. I walked to the kitchen and made a sandwich. Turkey, mustard, lettuce on wheat bread. I cut it diagonally and sat at the small table by the window. The winter light was fading, casting long shadows across the floor. The sandwich cost perhaps $3 in ingredients. I ate it slowly, tasting each bite. It was simple and honest, and it belonged to me completely. No one else's money. No one else's guilt. Sophie padded downstairs in her socks, rubbing her eyes. She climbed onto the chair beside me. Can I have one too, Grandma? I made her a half sandwich, with the crusts cut off. She ate it with her feet swinging, humming a tuneless melody. We sat together in the fading afternoon light, grandmother and granddaughter, eating $3 sandwiches in a house worth $2.8 million. And it was the most peaceful meal I had eaten in years. My phone buzzed once. A text from Nathan. I looked at it without picking up the device. You are destroying us. Sophie needs her mother. I finished my sandwich. I wiped my hands on a napkin. Then I typed back 2 sentences. Sophie needs protection from her mother. Ask Kristen about the Adderall. I put the phone in the drawer and closed it. Somewhere in Georgetown, a Ritz-Carlton concierge was explaining to 4 humiliated adults that their room keys had been deactivated. Somewhere Frank Hargrove was counting his diminishing cash. Somewhere the alliance was splintering under the weight of financial reality. Money was the oxygen that kept their conspiracy alive. I had just sealed the airlock. New Year's Eve arrived with a cold rain that turned the Georgetown cobblestones into mirrors. I was in the kitchen making hot chocolate for Sophie when the doorbell rang at 10 in the morning. I checked the security monitor. A woman in a gray wool coat stood on my porch holding a leather portfolio. She was in her 40s, with tired eyes and a professional posture that I recognized immediately. Government employee. Social Services Division. I opened the door before she could ring again. Good morning, Mrs. Voss, she said, producing a badge. I am Linda Torres from Adult Protective Services. I have received an emergency petition for guardianship regarding your welfare. May I come in? I stepped aside. Please. I have been expecting you. She paused on the threshold. The same reaction I had gotten from Victoria when I told her about Protocol Alpha. People do not expect their targets to be prepared. You were expecting me, she repeated. My daughter-in-law is running out of options, I said, leading her into the living room. She tried violence. She tried public opinion. She tried financial pressure. The legal system was the inevitable next step. I am surprised it took her 6 days. We sat in the living room. The space was immaculate. Fresh flowers on the mantelpiece. Books arranged on the shelves. No clutter. No disarray. No sign of the chaos that the petition apparently described. From upstairs came the sound of Sophie giggling. She was in her room, having a tea party with her stuffed animals. Linda opened her portfolio. She looked uncomfortable, which told me she was honest. Dishonest investigators are never uncomfortable. They enjoy the power. Mr. Nathan Voss and his attorney have filed a petition claiming rapid cognitive decline, she began, reading from the document. They allege paranoid behavior, violent outbursts, financial erraticism, and an inability to provide safe care for a minor child. They are requesting immediate temporary guardianship to freeze your assets and transfer custody of your granddaughter. I folded my hands in my lap, the steady hands of a surgeon who had heard worse news in operating rooms. May I address each point? I asked. She nodded. I reached into the drawer of the side table and pulled out the first envelope. Regarding my cognitive health, I said, this is a comprehensive evaluation performed 2 days ago by Dr. William Hartley, my primary care physician for 18 years. Full neurological workup including MRI, cognitive testing, and psychiatric assessment. You will find his conclusion on page 3. Above average function for my age group. No signs of decline. Linda took the letter and read it. Her eyebrows rose. Regarding the allegation of paranoia, I continued. I produced the evidence bags Marcus had left in my custody. These are electronic surveillance devices removed from my home on Christmas morning by a licensed private security firm. 2 cameras and 4 audio transmitters. The signal was traced to a cloud account registered to Kristen Voss. I was not paranoid. I was being watched. Linda stared at the devices in their sealed bags. She set them on the coffee table carefully, as if they might bite. Regarding financial erraticism, I said. I opened my tablet and pulled up the banking records. For 4 years I have supported my son and his wife entirely. Rent, credit cards, insurance, vehicle payments. 2 weeks ago, I terminated that support following a domestic violence incident in which my daughter-in-law assaulted me. The wound required 5 stitches. I have hospital records, police reports, and security camera footage. Cutting off financial support to adults who attacked me is not erratic. It is rational. Linda was writing furiously in her notebook. And regarding my ability to care for Sophie, I said. I pulled out the CPS custody document. On December 26th, Child Protective Services granted me emergency temporary custody after blood work revealed that Sophie had been administered unprescribed amphetamines by her mother for at least 4 months. The child's pediatrician has documented the medical evidence and filed a mandatory report. I placed the document in front of her. Linda read it. Then she read it again. She looked up at me. Mrs. Voss, she said slowly. This petition claims you are a danger to yourself and to the child. I know what it claims, I said. And now you know what the truth is. The only danger Sophie has ever been in was under her mother's roof. I removed her from that danger. I did it legally, medically, and with full documentation. The petition you are holding is not a cry for help from a concerned son. It is a legal weapon being used to regain access to my assets. Linda closed the portfolio. She uncapped her pen and made a large notation across the front page. She looked up at me with an expression that had shifted from professional neutrality to something resembling respect. I am recommending immediate dismissal with prejudice, she said. There is no evidence whatsoever of cognitive decline or inability to provide care. In fact, based on what I am seeing here, you appear to be the most competent person involved in this situation by a considerable margin. Thank you, I said. She was not finished. However, she continued, I have an obligation to note that the evidence you have presented suggests a pattern of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and child endangerment perpetrated against you and the minor. These are criminal matters. Would you like me to open a formal investigation into Nathan and Kristen Voss? I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. Weak December sunlight was breaking through the clouds, painting golden streaks across the wet street. Not yet, I said. I am handling this through proper channels. But keep that file open, Miss Torres. I have a feeling we have not reached the final act. She stood and extended her hand. Her grip was firm. Most people in your position give in, she said. They are afraid of losing their families. They surrender their autonomy because the loneliness seems worse than the abuse. You are remarkably strong. I shook her hand. I am not strong, Miss Torres. I am a surgeon. I do not crumble under pressure. I cut. She smiled for the first time since arriving. She gathered her materials and I walked her to the door. As she stepped onto the porch, she turned back. "Happy New Year, Mrs. Voss," she said. I watched her drive away. The 6th day of their siege, and they had now lost their legal weapon alongside their financial leverage, their physical access, and their public credibility. The walls were closing in on them from every direction. I closed the door and walked upstairs. Sophie was in her room arranging her stuffed animals around a plastic tea set. She looked up at me with a gap-toothed grin. "Grandma, do you want tea? It is chamomile. Your favorite." I sat cross-legged on the floor of her lavender room, my knees protesting mildly. She poured imaginary tea into a tiny cup and handed it to me with the gravity of a formal ceremony. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. "This is the best tea I have ever had." We sat together on the floor, drinking invisible chamomile while the winter afternoon faded into evening. At midnight, I carried Sophie to the front window wrapped in her blanket. Fireworks bloomed over the Potomac, streaks of gold and silver splitting the dark sky. Sophie pressed her face against the glass, her eyes wide with wonder. "Happy New Year, Grandma," she whispered. "Happy New Year, baby," I said. I kissed the top of her head. Her hair smelled like strawberry shampoo and safety. Outside, the old year was dying in fire and light. Inside, we were beginning again. On the 2nd of January, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Call it clinical intuition. The pause before the voice confirmed what I suspected. Ellie. Kristen's voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the venom from 6 days ago. Gone was the shrill entitlement. In its place was a trembling whisper, rehearsed in front of a mirror for hours. She sounded small, wounded, repentant. It was her finest performance yet. "I want to apologize," she said. "For everything, the glass, the video, the petition. I was not myself. The stress, the pregnancy hormones. I lost control. I just want to talk. Please. One dinner. Just to clear the air." I listened to the silence between her words. I heard what she was not saying. She was out of moves. The money was gone. The legal attacks had failed. The video had backfired. She needed a new angle, and the only one left was contrition. I knew she was lying, but I needed her on record. I needed her to make her offer in a setting where my phone could capture every word. "The Palm," I said. 6 o'clock tonight. Do not be late." I arrived 15 minutes early. The Palm was a DC institution, dark wood paneling, and caricatures of politicians on the walls. I chose a booth in the back corner facing the entrance. I placed my phone face down on the leather seat beside me, recording application active. I ordered sparkling water and waited. They walked in at 6, exactly. Nathan first, then Kristen behind him. They looked different. Nathan had lost weight in the 10 days since Christmas Eve. His jacket hung loose on his shoulders. His eyes were bloodshot and ringed with purple. He moved like a man carrying something heavy on his back. Kristen was dressed in a conservative floral dress, loose around the middle. No jewelry, no makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked like a Sunday school teacher. It was a costume designed to project humility. But I noticed her eyes scanning the room as she entered, checking exits, measuring threats, a predator wearing a lamb's fleece. They slid into the booth across from me. Nathan stared at the tablecloth. Kristen looked directly at me with eyes already glistening. "Ellie," she began, reaching across the table. "Thank you for meeting us. I know you are angry. You have every right." I moved my hand away. I sipped my water. I said nothing. She pulled back, performing the sting of rejection beautifully. "I want to make things right," she continued. "For Sophie. For the family. I know I crossed a line. Many lines. The glass, the video, all of it. I am so sorry." I watched her perform. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Every breath calculated. every pause measured. Nathan shifted. "We are barely surviving, Mom," he mumbled without looking up. "The motel is disgusting. We have no money. Kristen needs prenatal care. The baby." I let the word hang in the air. The baby. Kristen sensed the opening. She leaned forward. "We want to come home," she said. "We will follow your rules. My parents will go back to wherever they need to go. It will just be us. Me, Nathan, and the baby. We can be a family again." She paused. When I did not respond, she reached into her purse and pulled out a document. It was a single page, dense with legal language. "We drafted an agreement," she said softly. "A family trust. It puts the townhouse in Nathan's name for estate planning purposes, and it gives us shared power of attorney over your accounts. Not to spend your money, just to help manage things, so you can relax. Be a grandmother. Let us handle the stress." She pushed the paper across the table. Her eyes were bright with false hope. She thought this was the moment. She thought that loneliness and age and the desire for peace would make me reach for the pen. I picked up the document. I read it slowly. Transfer of property. Power of attorney. Access to all financial accounts. Effective immediately upon signature. It was a surrender document disguised as a family reconciliation. I folded it in half. Then I folded it again. "You want me to sign over my house?" I said. "It is just paperwork," she said dismissively. "It stays in the family. And you want control of my money." "To help you," she insisted. "For the baby." "The baby," I repeated. I set the folded paper beside my glass. I took a long sip of water. I placed the glass down with a deliberate thud. "You are very skilled at this, Kristen," I said. The tears, the costume, the soft voice. It is almost convincing. But you and I both know there is no baby. Her smile froze. Nathan looked up for the first time. "What?" he said. 3 years ago, I continued, my voice low and precise as a scalpel through tissue. "I paid the premium on your health insurance policy. I selected the platinum plan because I wanted you both covered comprehensively. Because I paid the bill. I received the explanation of benefit statements for every procedure." Kristen's face drained of color. She knew what was coming. I could see it in the way her pupils contracted. "On April 14th, 3 years ago, you underwent a bilateral salpingectomy. For those unfamiliar with the terminology, that means both fallopian tubes were surgically removed. Not tied, not clipped. Removed entirely. The procedure is irreversible. You cannot conceive naturally. It is a biological impossibility." The silence at the table was absolute. The ambient noise of the restaurant seemed to retreat, leaving only the vacuum between us. Nathan turned to look at his wife. His expression was not confusion. It was something worse. It was the slow dawn of recognition. The look of a man remembering 100 small lies that suddenly made sense. "Kristen," he whispered. "Is that true?" She stammered. Her hand dropped from her stomach. The performance collapsed, like a stage set, when the lights come on. "I can explain," she choked. "It was medically necessary. I did not want to worry you." The doctor said. "You told me you were pregnant," Nathan said. His voice was rising. 2 weeks ago. "You said that is why we needed the house. You said that is why we needed the money. You showed me a positive test." I watched the alliance fracture in real time. The fault line that had been forming since I mentioned the Adderall was now splitting wide open. I stood up. I picked up my phone from the seat. I had what I needed. "There is no baby," I said. "There never was. You used a fictional child to extort money from me and manipulate the man sitting next to you. You lied to the court. You lied to the internet. And you lied to your husband every single day." I looked at Nathan. His face was white. His hands were flat on the table, pressing down as if the world were spinning and he needed an anchor. "There is something else you need to know," I said. "About Sophie. About what Kristen has been putting in her food for 4 months. Ask her about the Adderall, Nathan. Ask her why your daughter's heart rate is dangerously elevated. Ask her what she meant in her text messages when she wrote that Sophie's meds are working perfectly. Nathan turned to Kristen. His eyes were no longer confused. They were horrified. And beneath the horror, I saw something I had not seen in 4 years. Clarity. I placed a $20 bill on the table and walked away. I did not look back. I heard Kristen call my name. I heard the beginning of a sob. But I kept walking through the restaurant, past the caricatures of powerful men on the walls, past the hostess stand, and out into the January night. The cold air hit my face. It felt clean, surgical. The truth was out. The lies were on the table. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, I saw something in Nathan's eyes that gave me hope. Not redemption. Not yet. But recognition. And recognition is where healing begins. The courier arrived at 10 in the morning on the 3rd of January. He was a young man in a black jacket carrying a thick manila envelope sealed with red security tape. He checked my identification twice before handing it over. Marcus Webb did not send sensitive materials through regular mail. I took the package to my study and closed the door. Sophie was in the kitchen, eating cereal and watching cartoons on the tablet I had set up for her. She was humming along to the theme song, her feet swinging beneath the chair. Normal. Happy. Healing. I sat at my desk and slit the red tape with a letter opener. The contents slid onto the mahogany surface. It was a dossier. Thick. Organized with military precision. Photographs, court documents, financial records, and a summary report typed on Marcus Webb's letterhead. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the thermos on my desk. Black. Hot. I began to read. The first page was a financial profile of Frank and Diane Hargrove. It confirmed what the chat logs had implied, but laid it out with the clinical detail of an autopsy report. For 12 years, Frank and Diane had operated a chain of 3 barbecue restaurants in Northern Virginia, cash-heavy businesses, the kind where revenue can be underreported without sophisticated forensic accounting to detect it. They had systematically skimmed approximately $120,000 per year from their gross receipts, reporting only 60% of their actual income to the Internal Revenue Service. Over 12 years, the total unreported income exceeded $1.4 million. The tax liability, including penalties and interest, was calculated at $1.2 million. I turned the page. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division had opened a case 18 months ago following a tip from a disgruntled former employee. The investigation had progressed slowly, but methodically, the way federal cases always do. 6 months ago, the case was referred to the United States Attorney's Office for prosecution. A grand jury had been convened. Indictments were sealed. Arrest warrants were issued. Frank and Diane Hargrove were federal fugitives. They had closed their restaurants overnight. They had emptied their personal bank accounts. They had abandoned their house in Fairfax and disappeared. The U.S. Marshal Service had been actively searching for them for 4 months, and they had been hiding 6 blocks from my townhouse in a motel registered under Kristen's maiden name. I turned to the next section. Marcus had obtained email correspondence through the digital forensics performed on Nathan's laptop. There was a thread dated 2 weeks before Christmas. The sender was Frank Hargrove. The recipient was my son. I put on my reading glasses and leaned forward. Nathan. The feds came to the restaurant last week. They know about the accounts. We have maybe 10 days before they trace us to Virginia. We cannot use our names anywhere. Hotels scan IDs now. We need to get into your mother's place. It is the only address they will not connect to us. A retired surgeon in Georgetown. No criminal history. No flags. They will never look there. Below it, Nathan's reply. I am working on it. She is stubborn. Kristen and I will push at Christmas dinner. If she says no, we will move them in, anyway, while she sleeps. Worst case, we claim squatters' rights. Just stay off the radar until then. Do not get pulled over. Do not use credit cards. I read the exchange 3 times. Each reading felt like another suture pulling loose from a wound I thought had closed. Nathan knew. My son knew that his in-laws were wanted by the federal government. He knew that bringing them into my home would make me an unwitting accomplice. He knew that if law enforcement traced them to my address, I could face charges for harboring fugitives. And he was willing to let that happen. He was willing to sacrifice my freedom, my reputation, and my legacy to save two people who could not even remember my birthday. I stood up and walked to the window. The January morning was gray and cold. The bare branches of the oak trees along P Street scratched against the overcast sky like skeletal fingers. I looked down at the street. A black SUV was parked 3 houses down. Engine running. Tinted windows. I had seen it yesterday as well, at roughly the same time, and the day before that, it had driven past my gate twice within an hour. I pulled up the security camera footage on my computer and rewound to yesterday afternoon. There it was, the same vehicle, same plate. I zoomed in on the driver's window. The tint was dark, but at a certain angle, with the right light, I could make out the shape of a thick-necked man behind the wheel. Frank. He was watching my house. He was mapping my routines. He was looking for a way in. I checked today's exterior feed. The SUV was there now. Idling. Frank was behind the wheel, talking on his phone, gesturing with one hand. Agitated. Desperate. A man running out of time and money simultaneously. I opened my phone and found the contact for the IRS criminal investigation tip line. My thumb hovered over the dial button. One call. 30 seconds. I could give them the plate number, the motel address, the email correspondence proving Nathan's complicity. Frank and Diane would be in federal custody by nightfall. Nathan would be arrested as an accessory within the week. But I did not press the button. If I called now, it would be over too quickly. Frank and Diane would go to prison, yes. But Nathan would claim he did not understand the severity. He would say he was manipulated. Kristen would cry to anyone who listened that I was a vindictive old woman who sent her parents to prison over a family argument. And more importantly, Nathan would not learn. He would not choose. He would simply be swept up in the current of other people's consequences, the same way he had been swept through his entire life. I needed him to make the choice himself. Not because I forced his hand, but because he finally understood what he was protecting and what he was losing. I gathered the documents and walked to the wall safe behind the portrait of Richard. I spun the combination dial. The heavy door swung open, revealing the hard drive, the audio recordings, the CPS documents, and now this. The complete criminal history of the Hargrove family. I placed the dossier inside and closed the safe. I looked at the exterior camera feed one more time. The SUV was pulling away. Frank was leaving for now. But he would be back. He was circling like a predator, testing the perimeter of a cage, looking for the weak bar. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria Chen. Nathan's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the protective order this morning. Denied. Judge cited ongoing investigation and evidence of conspiracy. They are running out of legal options. I replied, good. Let them run. When they stop running, they will start breaking in. And when they break in, we end this. I put the phone in my pocket and went to the kitchen. Sophie had finished her cereal and was drawing again. Another picture of a house with flowers. This time she had added a small dog next to the tall woman and the little girl. Grandma, can we get a puppy? She asked without looking up. Maybe someday, sweetheart, I said. When things are settled. She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and added a second flower to her garden. I watched her draw and felt the weight of the safe upstairs pressing against my thoughts. Inside that steel box was the power to destroy 4 lives. I would use it, but not yet. Not until Nathan stood at the crossroads and chose his own path. The nuclear codes were locked away. The countdown had begun, and Frank Hargrove's black SUV would circle my block one final time before the trap closed forever. The motion sensor alert came at 2:14 in the morning. A soft chime on my tablet, followed by a red dot blinking on the perimeter map. Basement level. East side. The window near the laundry room. I was awake. I had been sitting in my darkened study for 3 hours watching the security feed cycle. I knew this night was coming. Kristen's text to Nathan, intercepted through the cloned laptop sync, had confirmed it 12 hours ago. Get the paintings. We fence them in New York. Do it tonight or I am gone. The ultimatum I had been waiting for. I had prepared the basement window days ago. A small casement that Nathan had used as a teenager to sneak out to parties on M Street. He thought it was his secret. He never knew I always heard him. Tonight that window was unlocked, the frame greased. But 6 inches inside the threshold, invisible in the darkness, a laser tripwire crossed the floor, connected to a silent alarm at the Georgetown precinct. No sirens, no warning, just a digital signal traveling at light speed. I watched the basement camera feed, the window pushed inward. A dark figure slid through feet first. Black hoodie. Flashlight clicked on, the beam swept across the washing machine, the storage shelves. Nathan. I recognized his posture, the hesitant crouch. The flashlight held too high, like a child afraid of the dark. He was not a burglar. He was a desperate man operated by remote control. On my monitor, the red indicator flashed. Silent alarm triggered. Police response time, 4 minutes. Nathan crept up to the main floor. I heard the familiar creak of the 3rd step. He was heading for the study. For the paintings. 3 pieces on the north wall. A Basquiat sketch. A Frankenthaler watercolor. A Romer Bearden collage. Together worth approximately $400,000. Portable. Sellable. He pushed the study door open. His flashlight found the paintings. He exhaled shakily and moved fast. He lifted the Basquiat off its hook and tucked it under his arm. He reached for the Bearden. Blue light washed through the windows. Silent. No sirens. Just the sudden strobing illumination reflecting off glass and hardwood. Nathan froze. He turned and saw police cruisers blocking the street below. 2 units. Officers already exiting. He dropped the painting. It clattered against the floor. He turned to run. The front door crashed open. Wood splintering. Metal striking oak. Police. Get on the ground. Show your hands. Nathan stumbled into the hallway and ran directly into tactical gear and drawn weapons. He screamed. Hands shot up. He dropped to his knees, then his face. Handcuffs ratcheted shut. I walked out onto the staircase landing. I looked down. Nathan was face down on the hardwood, 3 officers surrounding him. His hood had fallen back. Mom. He screamed it into the floor. Tell them I live here. Tell them it is a mistake. I walked slowly down the stairs. Officer Reeves looked up and lowered his weapon. Mrs. Voss, are you all right? We received the silent alarm. They hauled Nathan to his feet. His face was wet with tears, his eyes wild and pleading. He looked exactly like the boy who broke the kitchen window at age 9 and expected me to fix it. Mom, please, he begged. It is not what it looks like. I was just getting my things. Tell them I am allowed to be here. Officer Reeves held up the Basquiat. Is this his property, Mrs. Voss? I looked at the painting, at the pry marks on the study door, at the open basement window. Then I looked at my son. I searched for something, a spark of honor. I found only the hollow stare of a man, emptied of everything except obedience. I do not know this man, I said. He broke into my home. He was stealing artwork valued at $400,000. I want to press charges. Nathan jerked as if struck. Mom. No. You cannot. I am your son. An officer began leading him toward the door. Nathan dug his heels in, thrashing. Then he shouted something that stopped everyone in the foyer. Kristen told me to do it. She said if I did not get the paintings, she would take Sophie and disappear. She has a fake passport. She was going to run. She said I would never see my daughter again. The words hit me like a defibrillator charge. Take Sophie and disappear. I looked at Officer Reeves. His expression changed. The desperation in Nathan's voice was not performance. It was the confession of a man who believed his daughter was in danger. "She is going to run," Nathan sobbed. "Mom, you have to believe me. She has been planning it for weeks. She was going to take Sophie to Europe. I only did this because she said it was the only way to keep my daughter in the country." They pushed him into the cruiser. The door slammed. Through the window, he was still talking, still crying, still trying to explain the inexcusable with the only truth he had left. "Take Sophie and disappear." 4 words that changed everything. This was not greed anymore. Kristen had been holding Sophie as a hostage, using a child as leverage to force a father into committing a felony. I turned to Officer Reeves. "There is an accomplice," I said. His wife instructed him. "I have text evidence. Based on what he said, there may be a flight risk involving a minor child." Kristen Voss. "Motel 6 on the interstate. Room 114. His radio crackled. He relayed the information. A second dispatch went out. I stood in my foyer as the cruiser pulled away. Blue lights reflected off Christmas decorations I had not taken down. My son was in handcuffs. And somewhere on the interstate, officers were racing toward a motel room where a woman waited for paintings that would never arrive. I closed the front door and stood in silence. She was going to take Sophie. That was the real game. Not the house, not the money, not the paintings. Sophie was the hostage. Kristen was willing to flee the country with a child she had been poisoning just to maintain control. I walked upstairs and opened Sophie's door. She was sleeping, undisturbed, blanket to her chin, crescent moon nightlight casting soft shadows on lavender walls. Safe, still safe. I leaned against the hallway wall. My hands were steady, but my heart pounded. Not from fear, from the adrenaline of a near miss. If Kristen had moved faster, if the timing had been different by one day. I sent Victoria a message. "Nathan arrested. He claims Kristen has fake passport. Planned to flee with Sophie. Police en route to her location. Need emergency flight risk order on the child immediately." Victoria replied instantly. "Filing now. No judge will deny this." I went downstairs and made tea. 3 in the morning. The house was quiet, except for the grandfather clock. Somewhere in the dark city, the net was closing around Kristen Voss. And upstairs, a 5-year-old girl slept peacefully, unaware of how close she had come to vanishing. The visiting room at the Fairfax County Jail smelled of disinfectant and despair. Concrete walls painted beige. Fluorescent lights humming at a frequency that matched the dull ache behind my eyes. I sat on a metal stool bolted to the floor, my hands folded on the counter in front of the plexiglass partition. Steady hands. Always steady. The door on the inmate's side buzzed open. Nathan shuffled in wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his frame. His wrists were cuffed to a chain around his waist. His ankles were shackled. He moved like a man 20 years older than 34. He sat down across from me. The plexiglass between us was scratched and cloudy from years of fingertips pressing against it in desperation. He picked up the phone receiver. I did the same. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I studied him the way I used to study a patient's vitals before surgery. The sunken eyes, the sallow skin, the tremor in his jaw. He was not just scared. He was withdrawing. Not from a substance. From a person. "Mom," he finally said. His voice was thin as thread. "You have to get me out. It is terrible in here. I cannot sleep. The men in my cell." He stopped. Swallowed. "Please." I looked at him without pity. Pity was a luxury neither of us could afford. "You broke into my home, Nathan. You committed felony burglary. You are here because of choices you made." "It was Kristen," he said immediately. The reflex response. The default setting. "She made me do it. She said if I did not bring the paintings, she would disappear with Sophie. She said I would never see my daughter again. I was trying to protect Sophie, Mom. You have to believe me." I let the silence stretch. 3 seconds. 5. 10. Long enough for the excuse to hang in the air and reveal its weakness. Tell me about the gambling, I said. His face went gray. He had not expected that. I have the records, Nathan. From your laptop, the offshore accounts, the sports betting, the online poker. You lost $30,000 in the last 6 months alone. That is why you lost your job, is it not? Gambling on company time. Skimming petty cash to cover losses. He stared at the counter. His fingers tightened on the phone receiver until his knuckles went white. How did Kristen find out about the debt? I asked. I already knew the answer. I wanted him to say it. She introduced me to the site, he whispered. 4 years ago. She said it was fun. A hobby. She set up the account. She placed the first bets for me. And when I started losing, she said she knew someone who could float me a loan. A guy her dad knew. A loan shark, I said. Nathan nodded without looking up. 30,000. The interest doubles every month. I cannot pay it. Kristen said the only way out was to get access to your money. She said if we controlled your accounts, we could pay off the debt and start fresh. She said it was the only option. The architecture of the trap was elegant in its cruelty. Introduce the addiction. Nurture the debt. Control the debtor. Kristen had not married Nathan out of love. She had acquired him the way a handler acquires an asset. She had built his dependency with the patience of a long-term investment. Tell me about Sophie's pills, I said. He flinched. The question hit harder than anything else I had said. She told me they were vitamins, he said. Children's vitamins for focus and energy. She ordered them online. She said Dr. Johnson recommended them. She gave them to Sophie every morning in her oatmeal. I never questioned it. I never. He pressed his forehead against the plexiglass. His shoulders began to shake. I saw things, he said, his voice breaking. Sophie's hands shaking, her heart racing at night. She used to wake up crying and saying her chest hurt. I asked Kristen about it. She said it was growing pains. She said all kids go through it. And I believed her because it was easier than questioning her, I finished. He nodded. Tears were running down his face now, dripping onto the metal counter. I watched my son cry and felt the complex mathematics of parenthood calculate in my chest. He was guilty. He was complicit. He had watched his daughter suffer and chosen comfort over courage. But he was also a victim. Manipulated, addicted, controlled. And unlike Kristen, he was capable of shame. Shame meant there was still something alive inside him that recognized wrong from right. I'm going to offer you a deal, I said. He looked up. Hope flickered in his bloodshot eyes like a pilot light in a dark furnace. I will drop the burglary charges, I said. I will tell the district attorney it was a family misunderstanding. I will post your bail today. Thank you, he gasped. Thank you, Mom. I promise I will. I raised my hand. There are 3 conditions. Non-negotiable. He nodded. Anything. Condition 1. You will file for divorce from Kristen Voss immediately. Today. My attorney has the papers prepared. You will cut all contact with her. No texts. No calls. No visits. She is a malignancy. And you are going to excise her from your life. He swallowed. His eyes darted to the side. But he did not argue. Condition 2. You will provide a full witness statement to the police regarding Frank and Diane Hargrove's location and their IRS fraud conspiracy. You will testify against them. And you will testify against Kristen regarding Sophie's medication. His breathing quickened. If I testify against Kristen, she will. She will what? I interrupted. Take Sophie? She was arrested last night, Nathan. They found the fake passport in her motel room. She is in custody. She cannot hurt Sophie anymore. She cannot hurt you anymore. The information landed on him like a physical weight. His shoulders dropped. His mouth opened. Something shifted behind his eyes. The last thread connecting him to her snapped. Condition 3, I said. You will enter an outpatient rehabilitation program for gambling addiction. I have identified a program in Baltimore. 12 weeks. Mandatory attendance. If you miss a session, the deal is void. He was silent for a long time. I watched him process. I watched the war between pride and survival play out across his face. He was not choosing between me and Kristen anymore. He was choosing between a future and a grave. "Will I get to see Sophie?" he asked. His voice was barely audible. I looked at my son through the scratched plexiglass. The boy who used to fall asleep in my lap during thunderstorms. The man who had conspired against me. The father who, despite everything, still asked about his daughter first. "If you earn it," I said. He closed his eyes. 2 tears fell. He opened them and looked at me with something I had not seen in 4 years. Not love, not gratitude. Surrender. The complete, exhausted surrender of a man who had finally stopped fighting the wrong enemy. "Where do I sign?" he said. I signaled to the guard. Victoria's paralegal entered the visiting room with a folder. 3 documents. Divorce filing. Witness cooperation agreement. Rehabilitation. Commitment. Form. Nathan signed each one with trembling hands, the pen scratching against paper in the silence. My son was not redeemed. Redemption is not a signature on a page. It is 1,000 small choices made over years. But he had, for the first time in 4 years, chosen his daughter over his wife, chosen truth over comfort, chosen the difficult path over the familiar cage. It was a start. And in surgery, the first incision is always the hardest. The Fairfax County Family Court smelled like old wood polish and recycled air. I had been in hundreds of sterile rooms where lives hung in the balance, but none of them had a judge's bench or a gallery filled with strangers pretending they had a right to watch my family bleed. I wore a charcoal suit, no jewelry except my late husband Robert's wedding band on a chain beneath my blouse. Victoria Chen sat beside me, her leather portfolio thick with tab dividers. Across the aisle, Kristen's attorney, a man named Delacroix with a goatee and a pinstripe vest, shuffled papers with the confidence of someone who had not yet seen what was coming. Kristen sat behind him in a cream blouse buttoned to the throat, her hair pulled into a soft bun. She looked like a kindergarten teacher. She looked like the woman my son had once described as his soulmate. She did not look like a woman who had fed amphetamines to a 5-year-old girl for 4 months. Judge Morrison entered. She was mid-50s, reading glasses perched on her nose, her gaze sweeping the room the way a surgeon scans a chest cavity before making the first cut. She reviewed the docket aloud. Case number 22-4117. Voss versus Voss. Emergency custody hearing. Child endangerment charges pending. Concurrent criminal referral to the Commonwealth Attorney. Victoria stood first. She spoke for 11 minutes without a single wasted syllable. She introduced Exhibit A through Exhibit K, in sequential order. Exhibit A was the emergency room photograph of my lacerated temple, 5 stitches, blood dried in a crescent along my jaw. Exhibit B was the surveillance footage from December 24th showing Kristen throwing the champagne flute. Exhibit C was the audio recording of Nathan's extortion call. Exhibit D was the laptop chat log, detailing the conspiracy to obtain guardianship through fabricated cognitive decline claims. Then she reached Exhibit E, and the courtroom went silent. The screen mounted on the left wall flickered to life. Dr. Amara Johnson's blood work report filled the frame. Dextroamphetamine detected at 12 nanograms per milliliter. An adult therapeutic dose in a child weighing 38 pounds. Victoria read the numbers aloud. She then played a 30-second clip from the family group chat in which Kristen typed, word for word, "Gave her the vitamin this morning. She was hyper but crashed by noon. Works better than melatonin." A woman in the gallery gasped. Judge Morrison removed her glasses. Victoria introduced Exhibit F, the CPS emergency custody order signed by Patricia Owens. Exhibit G, the recorded phone call in which Kristen threatened to take Sophie and disappear using a counterfeit passport. Exhibit H, photographs of the passport itself, recovered from the motel room on January 4th. Exhibit I, Marcus Webb's chain of custody report on 3 surveillance devices found in my home, installed without consent. Exhibit J, Frank and Diane Hargrove's sealed federal indictment for tax evasion entered into evidence by agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Exhibit K. Nathan Voss's signed cooperation statement, including his confession and agreement to testify. Victoria sat down. The entire presentation had taken 23 minutes. Delacroix stood. He objected to the admissibility of Exhibits C and G on grounds of one-party consent laws. Judge Morrison overruled both. Virginia is a one-party consent state. He objected to Exhibit J as prejudicial and unrelated. Judge Morrison noted the fugitive status of the child's maternal grandparents was directly relevant to the child's safety and denied the motion. Delacroix attempted a cross-examination of me. He asked whether I had a history of controlling behavior toward my son. I answered that I had paid for Nathan's college education, his wedding, his failed restaurant, and his wife's spending for 6 years, without a single condition attached, until my granddaughter's health was endangered. He asked whether I had fabricated the blood work. I told him I would be happy to provide the lab's CLIA certification number and invite the court to order an independent retest. He sat down after 4 questions. Kristen was called to the stand. She was sworn in. Delacroix guided her through a prepared statement about being a loving mother, about the stress of financial hardship, about her belief that Eleanor Voss was mentally declining and dangerous. She cried. She pressed a tissue to her nose. She said Sophie needed her mother. Victoria stood for cross-examination. She asked one question. Mrs. Voss, you testified under oath 3 minutes ago that you have never administered any non-prescribed medication to your daughter. Is that your testimony? Kristen said yes. Victoria asked Judge Morrison to replay the group chat audio clip. The judge allowed it. Kristen's own voice filled the courtroom. Gave her the vitamin this morning. Kristen's face drained of color. Delacroix requested a recess. Judge Morrison denied it. Victoria asked a second question. Mrs. Voss, are you currently pregnant as you claimed in the TikTok video viewed by 200,000 people? Kristen hesitated. Delacroix objected on relevance. Judge Morrison overruled, noting the video was entered as Exhibit L for defamation context. Kristen whispered no. Victoria nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Morrison recessed for 15 minutes. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the table, my pulse steady at 62 beats per minute. I had waited 14 days for this moment. It had arrived exactly as I had designed it. The gavel would fall within the hour. Judge Morrison returned to the bench at 11:15. The recess had lasted 43 minutes, not 15. I knew what that meant. A 15-minute recess meant a simple ruling. A 43-minute recess meant she had consulted case law, drafted language, and prepared for appeals. The gallery had swelled. Word travels fast in a courthouse. Clerks from adjacent chambers, 2 paralegals from the public defender's office, and a woman I recognized as a reporter from the Washington Post Metro desk had slipped into the back row. Victoria noticed her too. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Do not react to anything. Not the ruling, not the sentence. Not whatever Kristen does next." I nodded once. Judge Morrison adjusted her reading glasses and began. In the matter of Voss versus Voss, case number 22-4117, this court finds the following. Her voice was flat and precise, the verbal equivalent of a scalpel. First, the emergency custody order issued December 26th by Child Protective Services caseworker Patricia Owens is hereby ratified and made permanent pending criminal adjudication. Physical and legal custody of the minor child, Sophie Eleanor Voss, age 5, is awarded to the paternal grandmother, Eleanor Catherine Voss. I did not move. 62 beats per minute. Second, the respondent, Kristen Hargrove Voss, is found to have committed perjury during sworn testimony in this proceeding. This court refers the matter to the Commonwealth Attorney for criminal prosecution under Virginia Code Section 18.2-434. Kristen made a sound. It was not a gasp and not a sob. It was the sound a structure makes when a load-bearing wall is removed. A low, involuntary groan that came from somewhere below the diaphragm. Third, based on evidence presented including medical documentation, digital communications, and the cooperation statement of Nathan James Voss. This court finds probable cause to believe the respondent knowingly administered a Schedule II controlled substance to a minor child without prescription or medical supervision. This matter is referred to the Commonwealth Attorney for prosecution under Virginia Code Section 18.2-371.1 Felony Child Endangerment. Delacroix scribbled furiously. Kristen gripped the edge of the defense table with both hands, her knuckles white. Fourth, a permanent protective order is issued, prohibiting the respondent from approaching within 500 feet of the minor child, the petitioner's residence, or any location where the minor child receives education or medical care. Duration: 2 years. Renewable upon petition. Judge Morrison looked up from her papers and removed her glasses. Fifth, this court notes with grave concern the involvement of Frank Raymond Hargrove and Diane Louise Hargrove, maternal grandparents of the minor child, who are currently subjects of sealed federal indictments. This court orders that any visitation rights for the maternal family are suspended indefinitely until resolution of federal proceedings. She paused. The courtroom was silent enough to hear the ventilation system cycling. Finally, this court addresses the respondent directly. Judge Morrison's gaze settled on Kristen. Mrs. Voss, you entered this courtroom today with an opportunity to demonstrate accountability. Instead, you committed perjury within the first 5 minutes of your testimony. You fabricated a pregnancy for public sympathy. You administered dangerous medication to your own child. This court does not make moral judgments, but this court does protect children, and this child will be protected. The gavel fell once. A single, clean strike. Victoria closed her portfolio. She did not smile. She did not congratulate me. She simply said, "Phase 4 complete." I stood and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Delacroix requesting an emergency appeal bond. I heard Kristen say, "This is not over," her voice cracking on the last syllable. I heard the bailiff tell her to remain seated. I did not turn around. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My phone vibrated. A text from Marcus Webb. Frank's SUV spotted on I-95 South, heading toward Richmond. Marshals notified. ETA to intercept. 40 minutes. I typed back. Copy. The courthouse elevator was empty. I pressed the lobby button and leaned against the cold metal wall. For the first time in 14 days, I allowed myself to close my eyes for longer than a blink. The darkness behind my eyelids was warm. My pulse held steady, as it always had, as it always would. But my hands trembled, not from fear, not from relief, from something I did not yet have a name for. Perhaps it was the weight of winning a war you never wanted to fight. Perhaps it was the knowledge that your son would spend the next year rebuilding himself from nothing, and that you could not do that surgery for him. Perhaps it was simply exhaustion. The elevator doors opened. Sunlight flooded the lobby through floor-to-ceiling windows. January in Virginia. Cold, bright, merciless. My phone buzzed again. Victoria Chen. Post reporter wants a comment. I said no. Correct? I typed, correct. Silence is the sharpest instrument I own. I walked to my car. The parking garage smelled like concrete and diesel. I sat behind the wheel for 3 full minutes before turning the ignition. In the rearview mirror, my reflection stared back. 69 years old, 5 stitches healing on my left temple, a granddaughter waiting at home with a coloring book, and a heart that was finally beating at the rate a 5-year-old's heart should beat. I started the engine. There was one phase left. The phone rang at 3 in the morning. Not my cell phone. The landline. The one I kept plugged into the kitchen wall because Robert had installed it in 1986 and I never had the heart to disconnect it. It rang twice before I reached it, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. No caller ID. No number. Just the word unknown, glowing green, on the handset. I picked up. Eleanor. Frank Hargrove's voice. Low, gravelly, the kind of voice that belonged to a man who had spent 40 years smoking Marlboro Reds and lying to the IRS. "We need to talk." I said nothing. I let the silence stretch. 3 seconds. 5. 7. "I know you're alone in that house," he continued. "I know the girl is in the upstairs bedroom. I know your alarm system has a 14-second delay on the east side sensors. I know the police response time from the Georgetown precinct is 4 minutes and 20 seconds. My pulse did not rise above 64. I had trained for this. Victoria and I had discussed this exact scenario on December 28th. Marcus Webb had installed countermeasures on December 29th. The east side delay was no longer 14 seconds. It was 0. The response time was no longer 4 minutes. A U.S. Marshal sat in an unmarked sedan 40 feet from my front door. "What do you want, Frank?" "I want you to drop the cooperation agreement. I want Nathan's testimony sealed. I want the IRS file to disappear. You want me to obstruct a federal investigation. I want my family back." I almost laughed. Almost. The audacity of a man who had stolen $1.4 million from the United States government, fled across 3 states, hidden behind his daughter's maiden name in budget motels, and now stood somewhere in the darkness outside my home, demanding that I fix what he had broken. "Frank, you are a federal fugitive. You are currently under surveillance by the United States Marshals Service. There is a GPS tracker on your black Chevrolet Tahoe, license plate Virginia Bravo Kilo 7491. It was placed there on January 3rd, at the Motel 6 on Route 1. You have been tracked for 4 days." The silence on his end lasted 11 seconds. I counted each one. "You're bluffing." "I am a cardiac surgeon, Frank. I do not bluff. I diagnose. I cut. I close. And right now, your condition is terminal." I heard his breathing change. Faster. Shallow. The physiological signature of adrenaline flooding a system unprepared for fight or flight. "If you come within 100 feet of this house, the marshal outside will arrest you. If you contact me again, the recording of this call, which began the moment I lifted this handset, will be added to your federal file as evidence of witness intimidation. If you attempt to contact Nathan at the rehabilitation facility in Baltimore, his attorney will file a harassment charge within the hour." "Diane is sick," he said. His voice cracked. "She needs her heart medication. We have no insurance. We have nothing. You had $1.4 million, Frank. You chose to hide it. You chose to run. You chose to let your daughter feed pills to a 5-year-old girl, to create a dependency that would give you access to my home. Every choice has a consequence. That is not cruelty. That is physics." I heard something outside. Not through the phone. Through the kitchen window. An engine. Low, rumbling, then accelerating. Tires on wet asphalt. Moving fast. Moving away. Then a second sound. A siren. Short, sharp. The kind that meant a federal vehicle had activated its lights. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown government number. "Target vehicle in pursuit. Northbound. On Wisconsin Avenue. Stand by." I placed the landline handset back in its cradle. The green light faded. I walked upstairs. Sophie's bedroom door was open 3 inches, exactly as I had left it. The nightlight cast a pale yellow glow across her face. She was sleeping on her side, one hand curled around a stuffed elephant named Professor. Her heart rate, monitored by the pediatric smartwatch Dr. Johnson had prescribed, read 68 beats per minute on the app. Normal. Perfect. The heart rate of a child who was no longer being poisoned. I stood in her doorway for 2 full minutes. I did not enter. I did not touch her. I simply watched her breathe. In. Out. In. Out. The rhythm of safety. My phone buzzed again. Marcus Webb this time. Frank Hargrove apprehended at Wisconsin and M Street. Diane Hargrove taken into custody at Comfort Inn, Falls Church. Both in federal holding. U.S. Attorney confirms arraignment tomorrow at 9. I typed back 3 words. Thank you, Marcus. Then I walked to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and made a cup of chamomile tea. The house was silent. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, the January wind moved through the bare branches of the elm tree Robert had planted the year Nathan was born. I sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around the warm ceramic mug. The steam rose and disappeared. 5 phases, 14 days. Every variable accounted for. Every contingency mapped. Every predator neutralized. The surgery was complete. Now came the healing. 2 weeks after Frank Hargrove's arraignment, I sold the Georgetown townhouse. The listing went live on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I had 3 offers above asking. I accepted the highest. $4.1 million. Cash. No contingencies. 30-day closing. The buyer was a retired ambassador and his wife. They walked through the rooms with the reverence of people who understood that a house is not just walls and plumbing. It is the architecture of a life. I had designed every inch of that home with Robert. The crown molding in the study. The custom bookshelves in the library. The garden wall where Sophie took her first steps. But a house that has been violated does not feel the same. The bones are intact, but the soul has been punctured. I knew this the way I knew a heart that had survived a myocardial infarction. It would beat again, but it would never beat the same way. I did not mourn the sale. I had already mourned. Sophie and I moved into a 2-bedroom condominium on the 7th floor of a building in Old Town Alexandria. It had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Potomac. In the mornings, the river caught the winter light and held it like a mirror. Sophie pressed her palms against the glass and counted the boats. 3 on Monday, 5 on Wednesday, 2 on Friday, because it was cold and the wind made the water rough. Her heart rate stabilized at 72 beats per minute within the first week off medication. Dr. Johnson confirmed at her follow-up that all amphetamine metabolites were undetectable. Liver function normal. Kidney function normal. Cognitive processing back within the 95th percentile for her age group. She started sleeping through the night without the episode of rapid breathing that had terrified me in late December. She still asked about her mother. Not every day, but enough. Grandma, where is Mommy? I never lied to her. I told her that Mommy was in a place where she was getting help for making bad choices. I told her that people who love you do not always do the right thing, but that does not erase the love entirely. I told her that one day, when she was older, she would understand more. And I told her that no matter what happened, I would be here, every morning, every night. 68 beats per minute. Steady. She nodded. She went back to drawing. A house with a red door, and a river beside it, and a tall woman with gray hair standing in the garden. She labeled it in crayon. Me and Grandma's new home. I framed it. It hangs in the hallway beside the front door. Nathan completed his 12-week gambling rehabilitation program in Baltimore on March 15th. He called me the day he received his completion certificate. His voice was different, not broken anymore, but not yet rebuilt. Somewhere in between, the voice of a man standing in the doorway of a version of himself he did not yet trust. Mum, I want to see Sophie. You can. Supervised. Saturdays. 2 hours. Victoria will send the terms. Okay. A pause. Thank you. I did not say you are welcome. I said, earn it, Nathan. Every single day. He took a job as a project coordinator for a construction nonprofit in Alexandria. $72,000 a year. No commission, no risk, no gambling. He rented a studio apartment 4 blocks from our building. On Saturdays, he took Sophie to the park by the river. They fed the ducks. She showed him her drawings. He learned to ask questions and listen to the answers. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first stitch in a wound I had not been sure could close. Kristen's trial began in April. I did not attend. Victoria attended on my behalf and sent daily summaries. The Commonwealth attorney charged her with 2 felony counts of child endangerment, 1 count of perjury, 1 count of assault and battery, and 1 count of witness intimidation. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing: 8 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. She would be 41 when she was eligible for release. I felt nothing when Victoria texted me the verdict. No triumph. No satisfaction. No relief. Just the quiet recognition that a malignancy had been excised and the body could now begin its recovery. Frank and Diane Hargrove pleaded guilty to federal tax evasion in February to avoid trial. Combined sentence: Frank received 54 months in federal prison. Diane received 36 months with credit for time served. Their assets, what little remained, were seized. The 3 restaurants were sold at auction. The total recovery for the IRS was $412,000 against a liability of $1.2 million. The government would pursue the remainder through wage garnishment upon release. They did not contact me. They did not contact Sophie. The protective order ensured they could not. On a Saturday in mid-April, I sat on the balcony of our Alexandria condominium with a cup of Earl Grey and watched Sophie ride her bicycle on the path below. She had learned without training wheels 3 days earlier. She wobbled. She corrected. She pedaled forward. The river behind her was silver and still. My phone sat on the table beside me. No alerts. No missed calls. No motions filed. No threats. No manipulation. No surveillance. Just silence. The kind of silence that is not empty but full. Full of safety. Full of ordinary mornings. Full of a 5-year-old girl who was finally, irreversibly, free. I raised my tea to the sunlight. To Robert, I said quietly. I kept her safe. The wind moved across the balcony and carried my words toward the river. I watched them go. Then I took a sip, set the cup down, and went inside to help Sophie with her homework. The surgery was complete. The patient was healing, and the surgeon, at last, could rest.